Welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, where today will be part two of our summary of Whither Are We Traveling by Dwight Smith.
Ladies and gentlemen, brethren all, welcome to the Working Tools Podcast, a casual conversation around Freemasonry. First, it's important to note that our thoughts and opinions are our own and do not reflect those of our Grand Lodge or respective craft or concordant bodies. Please connect with us and ask questions via our website at theworkingtoolspodcast.com.
Today on the Working Tools Podcast, we have our usual group of hosts. I'm Matt Appel, and I'm a member of Mill Creek Lodge 243 in Mon Lake Terrace, Washington. And we have Worshipful Brother Jarrod Dunham from Penticton number 147 in Penticton, British Columbia. Very Worshipful Brother David Colbeth from King Solomon number 60 in Auburn, Washington. And Worshipful Brother Stephen Chung from Prince Charles number 153 in British Columbia, in Kelowna, British Columbia. And so we left off last time saying that we're going to sort of start out by this episode by talking about some more specific parts of the article, or some of the subsections of the article, and discussing our discussion of them. Discussion inception there. So I guess, David, is there a part that you particularly feels to you like we should go over it again? Or we should.
As I was looking at the list of the titles and stuff, I really almost had a shorter list of sections I didn't like or didn't agree with necessarily. And the one about the sounding brass or tinkling cymbal, the charity, the works. I mean, I agree that we should be doing works, but it just wasn't, in my necessarily favorite. And the decline of fellowship, under the festive board idea. Well, I think it's important that we do those things, and I know that in Canada you incorporate that into the lodge meeting, which I think is really cool. I just don't know that. It's interesting how we talk about how fellowship and the general fellowship of brothers isn't Masonry, but then we say, oh, the festive board is a very important part of it. And so just going and breaking bread or having dinner with somebody isn't as important. It isn't Masonry, but having a festive board is important, I guess. And so it's a little bit of dichotomy there for me on the idea of festive board and what Mason. Now, I understand that you may have a different purpose in your festive board. You're supposed to have a meaningful discussion about things, but it just seemed to be a little bit contrary. But I think in good Masonic fashion, he alludes to the idea of, and in the previous show, Matt said that he wanted more, right? He wanted more instructions and more details. But I think he kind of, in good Masonic fashion, he alludes to the idea that here's are the things that I think you could fix. Now go about figuring out how to fix them. And I don't know that having a set of instructions is always, yes, we should be kind of taught and guided how to do things, but if you just said, oh, here's the book of instruction, here's how to be a Mason, then why would we need Freemasonry? Just go read the book and do the thing in the book. Then it wouldn't be, oh, now we're perfect. We wouldn't need Masonry as the concept, right?
Well, especially considering that the whole point of this is to educate yourself. And if they spoon feed you the information, then you're not learning. You're not going to educate yourself. Plus, if he makes a list of this is how we'll fix it, you know that there's only going to be 5 guys that are going to agree with him.
Exactly.
So, yeah, I think the one thing about these articles that still annoys me a little bit is his constant harping on the master. If your ritual is bad, it's the master's fault. Don't have education, it's the master's fault. If your odd lodge officers aren't doing their jobs, it's the master's fault. And I agree that the master does guide the lodge, but if everything that's wrong with the lodge is laid at the master's feet, he's got way too much on his plate and no one else seems to be having anything.
But to his defense, he does start off the whole thing by talking about the level of leadership, the quality of leadership is lacking in our system.
But but leadership isn't one person.
I grant
and
that.
How many and lodge leadership is the past masters too. So you can't just blame it on the current one. You can't expect the upcoming ones to fix it. Everyone has to do this. And, I just felt that I felt very bad for whoever the master of his lodge is, because you got this guy sitting on the back going, "Oh, you're not doing it right."
It must have been a bad year or a series of years.
Yeah.
But symbolically, the master is the leader of the lodge, and so everything does. As they say, the buck stops here.
The buck stops there, but the work shouldn't. It shouldn't. And the blame, and the thing, a lodge is not one person. The blame needs to be spread evenly among everyone.
The blame, or the work, right? So shouldn't he be a good leader and then distribute the labor, right, and set the craft to work and make sure that they do what they're supposed to do?
Yeah. But I don't know what your year was like in the East, but it
was perfect. What are you talking about?
I get
a second chance at it.
Everyone showed up to the meetings well prepared, and everyone did their jobs. It's
of course.
I felt bad for the master, because it just seemed like he was the main reason things weren't working well.
I think too, if I had to pick out one or two of the best, my favorites, I put little asterisks almost next to every one of them, but I think the bread or stone, the quality of instruction, what are we really giving a new Mason? And that ties right into being asleep at the West Gate and those kind of things. But that, and then also the idea of, this is controversial, the subdivided we stand. I think there's too many organizations. I just was on a call today, and this lady was super excited about being raised to the grand level of whatever organization she's part of, and she's going to be super busy over the next 5 years. And I thought, yeah, now you're going to be pulled away from the organization that we're talking about right now. and so it just frustrated me a little bit. It generally frustrates me, even though I was at a Scottish Rite reunion this weekend. Several new Masons are becoming Scottish Rite Masons, and I thought, fortunately, from my particular lodge, and a little bit of pat on the back and brag, that the guys that attended that event all are part of our regular attendance. Matter of fact, a big pat on the back, the Sovereign Grand Inspector General, Al Jorgensen, who we've had on the show in the past, is a member of our lodge and is, of course, Sovereign Grand Inspector General of Washington, was at the event, but he couldn't be there for the first part because he was at another event. And so there's a little bit of that, but he is a kind of guy. He's a great example. He comes to our Blue Lodge meetings all the time. Every once in a while, he will miss something, but he comes to our social events. He comes to our degrees. He comes to our meetings. He's definitely committed to Blue Lodge.
Those guys are regular attendees of your lodge now, but now they've tasted the Scottish Rite honey. They're gonna.
Sorry, the guys that were there to visit. We only had one guy coming through from our lodge, but there were several of us that came to support him, and a couple of guys that were in the degrees. I actually haven't participated in any Scottish Rite degrees yet, other than as a participant, as an observer. But there were several of us that came to support him, and a couple of guys were in it. But they're all active in the Blue Lodge, and I think they all believe that Blue Lodge is the cornerstone. Maybe there's quite a bit more recruiting going on that I would prefer necessarily, but I think we all are mindful of the activity and not trying to supplant Blue Lodge for Scottish Rite or something else.
Yep.
Were there any other sections that you guys liked?
That's exactly what I was just going to ask. Jarrod, Steve, did you guys have specific thoughts?
Well, we all know I like the section where he says, "Get dressed better to go to lodge." I really, and once again today, my house is, I'm like half a block down from the Catholic Church, so I'm always grumbling on Sundays whenever we go out and can't come back and there's no parking on the street. But that's beside the point. But I can remember when I went to church as a child, and if I went to church dressed in what I see people walking by my house in, my grandmother would have boxed my ears. And it's the same thing with lodge. Is it? I know, and in the article it said, we judge no man by his outward appearance, but yes, we do. I'm sorry, yes, we do. It's not, and we shouldn't judge just by their outward appearance, but your outward appearance is important. And if you're showing up, we should have a higher expectation of what people wear to lodge. I mean, in this day and age, it really shouldn't. I mean, if it's a burden to buy a suit, it's probably a burden to pay your lodge dues. And to maybe be a Mason is at this point in your life not a viable option. So that was one that's the one that resonated with me the most, was, dress better for lodge.
Well, and expect more, keep your standards high, right? But I do, even though I've been known to show up at lodge wearing shorts and a holiday shirt and flip flops, but I was dragged there that way and told to come, because generally, and I did feel uncomfortable at the thought of going in dressed like that, because I've ever since I was an officer, I always wore a tuxedo, right? And then even after not being in an officer's chair, well, let me see, that's not very often since, but at worst wearing a dark suit, right? And yeah, we should hold those standards. And you're right, if it's too much of a financial burden, they're probably not in the right place.
Yeah, and the idea of don't reduce the lodge back to what we think the current, like you were saying, the current environment for humanity is much more casual these days, and so just be acceptant and allow the standard to be reduced. And he says, no, bring that back to what it is. And we on the Grandmasters conversation, we alluded to the event we just attended, the Grand Masonic Day. The speaker there, whose book we're going to be talking about in the next segments, he was talking about how in their lodge, they're trying to learn and become proficient in a Scottish lodge, if I'm not mistaken, and to be one of only 10 in the world to be able to, or 11th or something, anyway, one a very small number to be proficient in this. And I think he alluded, or he said it directly, that one night they got together and there was very few of them, and there wasn't a big suite or big crew to be able to open lodge. And one of the guys kind of said, hey, do we really need to do all this? I guess they have to process in and do a whole program. And he said, yes, we are going to do this. If I have to process in by myself and look at myself, I'm going to do this. And at first I thought, well, that's really pompous. But then I realized, wait a minute, he's just bringing the standard up to the line up to the standard, and not the other way around, right? He's saying, no, we are going to hold this. And I think in this article, as well as other ones, it talks about, like you mentioned, the dark suit or the proper dress should be the minimum. And we've always said in our lodge, hey, if you're coming from work, we'd rather have you there than not come, even if you don't have your suit with you. But I wonder if we said, no, we want you in your dark suit, would a guy prepare more? Potentially, he might. And I think that is, I think the sentiment is, no, we want you to come, but the expectation is that you prepare.
Well, it should be like Stephen on that one occasion where he went to lodge in shorts and a flip-flop, because he knew in his heart, he was doing something he shouldn't be doing, but like it felt wrong to him, because he knew, the standard that and the same thing with your brother, that, if they're coming straight from work, and that's part of the lesson of the 24-inch gauge is time management, and really how hard is it to put your suit in your car and take it to work with you, and when you get to the lodge, change into your suit if you don't, yeah, expectations and expect. Well, once again, this whole article is about expecting more. Like, if you settle, then this is what you get when you settle. Expect more from people. Expect more from your brothers. Expect more from Freemasonry, and when you expect more, you will eventually get more.
Yeah,
but then you expect more after you get more, and then you expect more after, and it just becomes efficient. No.
And, when I was more on the road with the sales, on lodge nights, or even if there was a chance I was going to an area and I was still going to be there and for lodge that night, and I could do a visitation, I would throw a suit in the car and hang it up in the car and take it with me just in case. Right. Sometimes I forget my apron, but not usually. And then at least I'm prepared to at least get changed when I get there. Right. Because even business casual slacks and a shirt and tie is still feeling underdressed to me going to lodge, right? So, then I learned, hey, if I got black slacks, a decent shirt, all I really need to throw in the car is a sport coat or a black jacket of some sort to make it look okay, right? And you find ways around it so that you can be properly dressed when you go to visit or go to lodge, right? So, yeah, I think it's that 24-inch gauge lesson, right? Be prepared, right? Manage your time so that you can do these things.
Yeah, recently I saw, I don't remember exactly what lodge in Washington. There was a degree that had occurred, and they were all excited that they had brought these. I think it was even a second degree, so it wasn't just a first one. And at first, when I looked at the grouping of brethren, of course they were excited. They had done this degree, but I couldn't quite tell who was the candidate versus who was the Masons, because sometimes a candidate maybe won't, and maybe it was a first degree. It must have been a first degree, because some of them sometimes they don't come in a full suit, right? They come maybe in a button shirt or something, because they aren't maybe either aren't instructed on how they should arrive, or they just haven't purchased it yet, or whatever the reasons are. They don't come maybe with a polo shirt on. But there were several guys with checkered shirts or polo shirts or things on, and then there were some with suits and some with tuxes. I think, boy, this is a real. I remember the first time coming in my lodge building, my temple building, thinking, "Oh, this is cool. I get to see behind the doors." I've never, as a new guy coming in before I was a Mason, and walking in and thinking, "Oh, that paneling's from 1960," and then the carpet was a different color. And then they showed me the lodge room, the ceremony room. It was cool to go look behind the lodge room doors, but it was 6 different colors of chairs and 4 different colors on the walls, and it was not a really beautiful room. And I thought, "Ooh, this is cool, but really, this is the secrets of Masonry." And so I kind of look at that a little bit in that dress and think, do they not know who they are and what they're representing, and what experience are they giving to these new candidates? And even if it was a second degree, that's even a little bit worse in my opinion. What are they showing to this guy? Now, if it was one guy in the back, and again he came from work, and or some reason there was an emergency, or some guy was camping and he had flip-flops and shorts on, that might be a different situation. And not all lodges are like that. There's many, of course, that I see that are fully dressed and fully prepared, but it's just interesting to see some of these lodges that, and I know in other jurisdictions I've seen across on social media, the wide variety of dress. And I think, wow, that's an interesting culture. I'd be curious to know more about that lodge. And it's not necessarily like in Hawaii, they wear aloha wear. That's their formal wear, or in other parts of the world, they have the kind of certain dress that matches with their culture, so to speak, and their environment. And so maybe a different situation. A 3-piece tuxedo might be a little bit hot in some locations, but if they were all matching or all similar, I don't know. It's my Sesame Street days. One of these kids is doing his own thing. And that might be.
Are there other parts that people particularly remember reacting to that we should rehash? Or I'm getting a lot of contemplative looks. Well, there you go. As I said at the time, I really enjoyed the actually David just mentioned it a minute ago, the bring the line up to the standard, not the standard back to the line thing. But there's a part of me that has I enjoyed that imagery and I found it powerful, but I don't know that if I were the commander of that military unit, I would go, yeah, except we're a whole line of soldiers over here. You get back over here, dude. So it's
the story kind of loses it with that one, but yeah.
Yeah. That article, that portion of the article I found interesting and powerful, but I don't know that I found it to be very powerful on first glance. And then as I thought about it more, I thought, you know,
I like the idea of it, that it only takes one, so to speak. And then, like, if you all have seen the Demolay light ceremony of light ritual, it's really kind of, let's talk about powerful. It's especially in a dark room, where they go through and they'll talk about the necessities of life and the things, the virtues that hold Demolay high, and then they talk about the world that closes in on them, and they extinguish all the candles, and so it becomes a dark room. And then they say, but if one man, one boy, one person can bring light, then he can pass that to another, and then they together go around and light the candles, and pretty soon it's illuminated. And yeah, it's a little bit corny, but you get the idea that it does just take one person. And so if that guy with the standard, I like the vision too. If the guy with the standard is like, come on, please. And, if he wasn't racing forward and wasn't waving the standard, wasn't waving the banner, then there wouldn't be anything else to motivate somebody else. And maybe he motivates one guy at the other end and he goes, okay, go. I mean, in years and years and years ago, I had been part of some political teachings on how to do political rallies and political motivation stuff. But it was really about crowd control. And they said, if you have a speech and you want to induce applause, have people staged throughout the crowd and have them start clapping, and magically everybody would clap. And so it's the same idea. If you have one guy with the standard and then he convinces one other person, he convinces another person, and pretty soon there's enough of them, and then everybody's convinced, and you move forward. Now maybe the general could stop them, but I think you do have to be conscious. You're right, conscious of where you are in the field of battle, so to speak, or whatever you're trying to achieve. But you also have to have that motivation to step out and try to drive things forward. And if there's enough of us doing that, then hopefully society would follow.
So I guess part of the question I have now is, now that we've read this 60-year-old article, is the state of Freemasonry as bad now as it was back then? Have we made strides? Well, that's crickets. That's bad, man. Last episode I already said that I think up here we have that we're heading in the right direction. So
I think there's some semblance of that in some areas. I don't know that all areas. I don't think we'd be talking about it if we thought we were all perfect, though, right? It wouldn't be as juicy of a topic.
No.
And as I've alluded to a few times, is the next book we're going to talk about really alludes to that. And that wasn't 60 years ago, 40, 50 years ago. That was just 15 years ago, 20 years ago that he wrote that. So, and we're now talking about it again. There's a little bit of a renaissance of it again. And so we're already, and maybe it's just a level of consciousness, right? Maybe it's that 10 years ago, we didn't think about it too much or didn't care about it too much. But now it's like, hey, let's get this back. And there's enough of us.
Or there's a few of us enough.
That's true. That could be.
Maybe we've hit that point where we had to get rid of some of the chaff in order for us to, get to the wheat. Is that the right imagery? Am I using that right?
Freemasonry isn't dying, it's refining. We talked about that article.
Right.
There we go. So, I mean, maybe that's the thing, is that, 60 years ago at the height, 1963, when our jurisdiction was at the height of its population, it wasn't the right time to be talking about this. 30 years ago, sorry, 20 some odd, not quite 30, almost 30 years ago when I joined, they were still talking about, the decline in membership, but maybe there were still too many then. Maybe we are finally at the point where, we can get down to the job of actually refining what we have left.
We've hit rock bottom.
No,
no,
we've hit the rock at the bottom.
We're at the quarry. We're at the bottom of the quarry. now to build the steps out.
Well, with that positive imagery.
No, I agree. I think that you're right. I think we are refined to the point. I like that, Matt, as that we're not refining. We're not dying. We're refining. I agree with that.
All right. And so on that note, it seems that we've about ground to a halt in our conversation of the Whither Are We Traveling series of articles. So I want to say I've enjoyed talking about it. I encourage people to go read it for themselves or listen to, as I said earlier, Jarrod's mellifluous tones as he eruditely speaks the words of Dwight Smith. And as David has alluded to several times now, our next thing that we're going to be talking about is Observing the Craft. It's a book from, I want to say 2010, from Andrew Hammer. 2010. About 15 years ago.
Don't do math on there.
You have to subtract 2 years in there because they didn't happen.
Okay. So by a gentleman named Andrew Hammer, who 3/4 of us got to hear speak a couple weeks ago back at Grand Masonic Day, and Jarrod missed it, and so he's sad and pouty. But it was definitely illuminating, and it's an interesting book. I read it several years ago, and I'm currently rereading it for the purposes of our discussion here. It's but I encourage folks to go out and find themselves a copy. I'm sure if you don't feel like buying one, I'm sure a Mason has one, because it's around. Jarrod has the pretty blue leather copy. If you want to borrow it from him, he won't let you have it because he likes it. Exactly, he won't let you have it because he likes it too much. But so there are a couple of editions floating around, and it's what we're going to be discussing next. So next time we'll probably be discussing the intro. Maybe we'll do the first chapter depending on how far we get.
He does,
and as usual.
I was going to sorry to interject, Matt, but he does on his website as well have some PDF papers of things he talks about that he technically left out of the book, but the 8 steps to Lodge excellence are Observant Lodge are a great synopsis of what the book is about as well, and that's available free on his website.
And there you go. And the website is?
Yeah, of course you'd ask me that. I don't have that. If you just
interrupt me, huh?
Or search for Observe the Craft. I know it's out there.
All right. So with that, we encourage you to start reading the book now, because we'll be discussing it soon here. And we encourage you also to let us know what you think of our discussions and our commentary. And we thank you all for listening to the Working Tools podcast. On behalf of Jarrod and Stephen and David and myself, thanks for coming along. Goodbye.